All right, I think we can get started. We have a bunch of people in here. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Emily Hughes. I'm the marketing lead at Mobilize. I will be your MC for the day. Our world is very rapidly changing around us, but we know the intensity of your work hasn't slowed. This session was originally scheduled for NTC in Baltimore, which would have been kicking off today. Since its cancellation, we have pivoted the content completely to focus on virtual organizing efforts to better support your organizations. So Annie, next slide, if you don't mind. Couple quick requests before I hand it off. Please remain muted so that all attendees can hear without distraction or interruption. We have almost 70 people on already, and many more will be joining in the next few minutes. You should by default be muted, but if you accidentally unmute yourself, the icon is in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. It's a little microphone, and it will indicate green if you're not muted and red if you are muted. Also, we have plenty of time at the end for questions. You can leave them in the chat feature and I'll collect them and make sure to ask our speakers at the end to get them answered. We also will send a recording likely tomorrow and you can share it with your colleagues and whoever would be interested. So from that, I will hand it off to Annie and Adam Michael, who are our speakers for the day.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Michael. I am the Chief Development Officer at Mission Graduates based in San Francisco, California. Kind of, one of the first cities to feel the effects of shelter in place. So we've actually not been working for about 2 weeks in our offices. Mission Graduates is an organization here in San Francisco that works with first generation and newcomer youth and their families as they access the public school and education system here in San Francisco. So we're really working to try to make college the expectation and not the exception with these students. And at any given point, Mission Graduates has about 100 to 150 volunteers. So this conversation is going to be really timely, and I'm going to be able to pull in a lot of examples of how we're being able to pivot with the current sheltering in place that's going on.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much, Adam Michael. It's so great to have all of you guys on the call. We're so excited to connect with you. My name is Annie Lewallen. I am an advisor with Mobilize, helping them expand meaningfully into the nonprofit space. I started my career with an organization called Mercy Corps, which is a global humanitarian aid and development organization in Portland, Oregon. I spent several years there working in South Sudan and conflict zones, and I afterwards became eager to learn about different business models and actually went over to management consulting and private equity for a bit, and then really missed social impact work and started advising startups with a social mission. So when I found Mobilize, my immediate thought was, oh wow, like this, I really could have used a platform like this in the field with Mercy Corps, where one of the challenges we were facing constantly was, how do we get more people? How do we get more volunteers? How do we get more support? And how do we engage them in a meaningful way in the long term? So quickly, I think it's fun to get a sense of who is on the call today, since you guys can't really see each other or know who each other is. So if you have a camera, if you could take yourself off camera and just say hi to everybody. And we have about 100 plus people who signed up. Emily was saying about 75 on the call now. You guys represent an incredibly diverse array of organizations: human services, social justice, food banks, animal services, across a variety of different functions. So it's really fun to see you guys connect.
So before we begin, we really wanted to go over what we've been hearing from you. So I'm sure many people on the call are your directors of development or chief development officers, and much like me about a week to 2 weeks ago, probably we're starting to say we need to do something, or we need to focus on this. This is going to be big. And I know my organization that was about a month ago where we started saying, okay, we're going to need to have some contingency plans. So we also wanted to go over a few of the things that we've been hearing from you. So obviously during this time, people are concerned about drops in big dollar donors. So, those major gift donors during these times, obviously are sustaining donors that are getting us, cash in the door. But during this difficult time might be hard to reach. We're also hearing, concerns of the lack of in-person engagement in direct fundraising. So if you're like me, 30 to 40% of your time as a development professional is spent out in people's houses, at restaurants, at different meetings. And suddenly all of those meetings have to take place virtually. What does that really look like and mean for us as a profession? And then just the economic instability that is taking place. One of the things that we're seeing here that may be different, because I've heard a lot of references in fundraising to, oh, this is like 2008, or oh, this is like 9/11. And I would like to put pause on that to say, actually, we're having both of those things take place at once, right? And it's nationwide. So we have a catastrophic event, plus we're on the verge of recession. We're in an unprecedented state, and it's really affecting people's willingness to give. And then at the same time, if you're a volunteer-based organization, your volunteers are literally disappearing in front of you. You're not being able to engage with them. You're not being able to have that conversation or that program take place so that volunteers are able to engage with the organization. And then the last thing, if you're like me, last Friday, you probably received like 20 to 30 appeals from every nonprofit that you love and enjoy. Mission Graduates was one of those that sent it out, but asking for emergency funds. And we want to make sure that we talk about not getting lost in all the noise. I referenced the other day, it feels like December 31st on Groundhog Day. Like, just every day it's just 30 to 40 appeals. And so how do we stick to our mission as an organization and make sure that we're not getting lost if all this noise is taking place?
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, that's super helpful context. The objective for today, we really want to leave you with two things. We want to leave you with quick wins, because this is a crisis. You guys need to act now, and you need strategies that you can go home and implement. But we also want to tie in long-term strategies, because leveraging volunteers to improve fundraising outcomes is not just a short-term problem, it's also a long-term issue. So this presentation over the next hour is structured as a series of recommended strategies. Then we will talk about the tactics that specifically underlie those strategies, and then findings and data and case studies to support that. If you all leave here with nothing else, remember that the thesis of this entire presentation is nonprofits often treat volunteers separately from donors, and this is missing a huge opportunity. And volunteers, we're focusing specifically on volunteers because it's a quick win. They're a unique combination of highly, highly engaged group of people that want to give their time, that want to be at your organization, and they're often severely underleveraged. So this is a really important group from which to draw on to improve fundraising outcomes. The picture on the right is a screenshot of an organization that represents really the traditional track that most organizations have when they're engaging their supporters. Typically, the options are you can volunteer, you can advocate, or you can donate. They're never really integrated, or not often integrated into one journey. So we're going to talk about that too. Right. So with that, we will leave you with our 4 recommended strategies, and we'll talk through these in detail. So we've ordered them in kind of most immediate to more long-term strategies to implement. So the first one is using virtual events to maintain engagement and cutting through the noise that Adam Michael was talking about. These are really extraordinary times right now, and we need more than ever to build engaging calls to action to keep supporters engaged at home. So that's number 1. Number 2, we should be asking volunteers to donate. But with a caveat, those asks to donate have to be strategic. And we'll get into that as well. Adam, Michael, I think you have some stories of why, or we'll get into some stories of why strategic asks matter and how to ask volunteers for donations.
Yeah, I mean, at Mission Graduates, we realized really that we were starting from zero when it came to volunteers being asked. Volunteers had never been asked. So for us, when we started this process, it really took a lot of coming together and centralizing the process, and realizing that it's okay to ask volunteers. And I'm sure many development professionals on the call, sometimes their volunteer department doesn't even lie within their realm. And that's what I inherited coming into Mission Graduates. Our volunteers were over here, our communications program was over here, and really realizing that the best way to centralize this, when I had a goal to raise more individual gifts, was basically going to our volunteers and realizing they'd never been asked. Also, number three, realizing our volunteers don't exist in isolation. They have their own networks, and we should be tapping into them to drive engagement, which then just further drives donations for us. And then in the long term, we want to talk about it's smart to connect organizational structures and workflows to optimize engagement across supporters. And so unifying all of our supporters' work and aligning those functions accordingly will allow you to work smarter, not harder.
Awesome. So a lot of the data we'll be sharing today comes from the Mobilize platform. So we feel like it's helpful to give a quick overview of what the platform is and what it does at the very highest level. You guys all on the call today already understand Mobilize to a certain degree because you used it to sign up for the webinar. So you know kind of the confirmations and reminders and the sign up process. But I think an overview is helpful nonetheless. So while Mobilize enables a lot of these strategies we'll be talking about today, they are not Mobilize dependent. I just want to make that clear as well. So Mobilize is an events management and volunteer recruitment platform. We do three things really well. We make recruiting volunteers and supporters easier. We engage them at the highest possible rates by driving them to take specific actions. And then we supercharge all of that effort through a network. And you can see on both sides of the slide, you've got two sides of a network. You have the nonprofits that need action, and you've got the people who want to act. So by creating really great experiences on both sides and allowing that data to be managed and tracked, we can connect those two audiences to each other. And just as an example of what this looks like in real time, I just wanted to show what the feed on the left looks like from the volunteer perspective when they're searching. So much like a LinkedIn feed or a Facebook feed, a volunteer will come to mobilize.us, or they will come to your website and look for opportunities and sign up. And then on the right-hand side is what the back end looked like. So the administrators will see how to manage a lot of the data. It's going to look similar to some systems that you have in place or that you've seen in how the data is managed. But what's particularly interesting and what drives us every day as a company is conversion. How do we optimize the actions that people are taking, and how do we make sure that people are taking more actions at the highest possible rates? So with that in mind, with that overview, we are going to talk about our first strategy, which is using virtual events. So with this crisis, there are a few things happening with our volunteers. In-person opportunities are disappearing, as Adam Michael was saying. There's lots of asks. They're getting inundated with lots of asks from a lot of different organizations. There's a lot of noise. And the other thing is I think a lot of them assume that their ways of helping are limited. So those are things that we have to fix. And one of the first things we can do is by turning those in-person opportunities into virtual events. And we'll kind of go through a little bit later on how to do that. The second important piece is make sure that you're letting people know that they can still help. So in those virtual events and actions, you're actually reinforcing the fact that people can still do those actions virtually. Just a clarifying question or a clarifying point on events. When we say events, events can mean a lot of different things. in Mobilize. They can mean actual events that you host, like house parties or meetups, but they also mean actions. They mean volunteer opportunities. They could be virtual phone banks that organizations can check on their vulnerable populations. They can be getting a petition signed to help pass something in the legislation. So it's a lot of different ways that events and actions can be thought up in Mobilize. Another piece is giving people specific actions they can take. So being really specific in your call to action about what they can do. And then this one I really like, building hooks to get volunteers to stay involved. One of the things, if you see on the right in our platform, we've actually built into the sign up flow. So once you've signed up for an event or an action, immediately you'll get a pop-up that actually suggests events that you may or may not like, that you may want to attend. So from that, 15 to 20% of people signed up for additional events right away that were suggested to them. So this is driving quite a bit of signups and activity. So findings on Mobilize really support a couple of things. They support that people really want to take action, even in this time. 90% of signups on Mobilize were for virtual events. So people are really driven to do things now. And events, even virtual ones, are really powerful in engaging people. So our clients right now, I think 88% of events that our clients have created were virtual on the platform.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the areas of opportunity and challenges that mission graduates have been having as this public health crisis kind of continues on. I want to stop though first and say, one of the things that I think that we have to think about for volunteers in a long term is that volunteers want community. And oftentimes that organization can provide that community. So I think that we often, first, I know there's this understanding like, oh, we can't ask volunteers because they give so much of their time. And I always say that like time is one of the most precious things you can give. So if you're already giving your time, then asking someone for money is going to be even easier. And then people give to organizations, not because we have needs, but because we meet those needs. And so you're providing that space of community for those volunteers. And now more than ever, we're striving and like longing for community. I'm sure a lot of people have seen or participated in virtual social hours or happy hours themselves just because we're craving that community connection. And so all these nonprofits that you are leading have that community already there. So think about innovative ways to bring that community together. So specifically, mission graduates, we have about 100 volunteers at any given point that are working with our cohort students. So we have a cohort model that we work with you when you're a junior in high school until you graduate college. And so right there is our largest volunteer base. And we suddenly found it almost near impossible for our volunteers to meet with their students to help them with their ACT prep or their essays for college. And this is a critical time for college acceptance. Our students are finding out right now if they're getting into college. We had all of our college students obviously had to evacuate from their dorms. And so trying to figure out a way for volunteers to make that connection. And so we quickly pivoting and turning all those one-on-one mentoring moments into virtual mentoring via video. That's something that definitely can happen. One of the things that we do is after school programs at schools. So starting today, I believe it's in 10 minutes, Mission Graduates is going live with story time. It's free on Facebook Live for anyone, but we'll be providing English lessons for our families via Facebook Live. And doing some DIY crafts with some of our program directors and just other fun ways just to get the community engaged. Because if we're asking people for money in this time, I'm a big believer we have to be providing something back to the community. And then we're also looking at online group drop-in office hours. So just bringing time for the community to come together. If you don't previously have a impact committee or a younger, some people call it like a junior board or a volunteer board, it would be a time to maybe start thinking through that and seeing if you want to get, some of those high value volunteers all together just on a social chat and talk about the organization, give people updates about what's going on in the organization, maybe have the ED stop in. Those are all ways to keep engagement high. I know we're also planning a panel just with some of our program directors for the community to see. And then we're also hosting a happy hour for our impact committee to hang out together and just realize other ways that they can support the organization. So we're really working to move all of our critical, essential components virtually as quickly as possible.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of our clients do the same. So this is definitely something that people are doing. Now that we've discussed how to engage volunteers virtually, let's talk about how to capitalize on that engagement to drive fundraising. So as Adam Michael astutely pointed out, there are right ways and there are wrong ways and moments to ask for donations. So the first really critical piece is identifying those key moments when the donation ask is most effective. The other is make it really simple and quick. People don't want to click through multiple pages. They don't want to log in. Anything that reduces the friction on that journey, the better. And automate as much as possible. So incorporating it into automated emails or automated sequences that you send as an organization. And then something really interesting that we've seen a lot of our clients do actually is create events and actions that are actually themselves calls to action to donate that redirect to their fundraising pages. So, we were talking about Mobilize and the network of volunteers and supporters, which I think is around 1.7 million at this point. It's basically recruiting using that network and the network of the volunteers to recruit more people and more eyes and grow your list and sort of have them easier to see the donation ask. So what's been really fun to watch on Mobilize is that volunteers do want to donate and they will donate. 15% of volunteers that are shown the donate ask initiate a donation. And just to give you a sense of where we put the donation ask, this is a typical kind of volunteer journey on Mobilize. So it's from discovery is when they find the opportunity, when they sign up, when they bring friends, show up and give their feedback. Most clients incorporate it right after the sign up. We found that is a pretty strategic place to put it. And that is where we're seeing 50% of volunteers initiate the donation. We're also experimenting a lot with different places to put donations. So using donations as a make good if they flake. So if somebody says, if somebody didn't show up for a shift, asking them for a donation could be a strategic time to ask. Also incorporating into follow-ups, into thank yous, and into feedback is also really critical. And then I'll come back to this in a second, but bring friends is a really key one. And it's not as directly related. It's directly related to fundraising, but in the sense that when your volunteers and when your supporters bring their friends, which I think they're already kind of inclined to do, if you make it really easy for them to share on social, to share with their friends, that just widens the amount of people that you can then drive to donate. Great. So activating, which brings us to activating your volunteer networks to drive grassroots donations. So again, similar to the donation ask, it's really important to identify key moments to tap into your volunteer networks. So I don't know if you guys noticed, it may be super hard to see, but on the other here, if you look at the bring your friends pop-up here, it says share with your friends. Then these two examples say, thanks, can you bring a friend? And then who are you bringing with you? I'm showing you this to demonstrate where we started from with Mobilize and asking people to share with a friend. and where we got to, because we're constantly experimenting with language that gets people to act in a more meaningful and faster way. And this little change from thanks, can you bring a friend, to who are you bringing with you, really resulted in a significant uplift in people actually signing up. So that's something to think about, that language actually matters, and how you call people to action really, really matters. This one is less related to really activating friend networks, but what we've seen clients do that's pretty creative is using those volunteer lists to build lookalike audiences that you would target, on Facebook, for example, and then show them those events to grow your list or get more supporters. So our findings from Mobilize: 40% of volunteers on the platform share their opportunities with friends. So further supporting, volunteers want to talk about what they're doing. They want to socialize what they're doing. We just have to ask them. And then also something really cool, 17% of our signups on Mobilize come from social recruitment. And we have increased that number by 60% this year. So we have big kind of targets and how to increase that even more. And then here is just showing kind of how to intelligently integrate this kind of bring a friend and volunteer engagement into the platform here. And you'll see you can build it into, I think you guys all got a confirmation probably from being on this webinar. And I think you were asked in the title of it to who are you bringing with you, or who are you going to share this with? So again, some of the ways that we are incorporating that into the platform and the data that we're getting from that.
Yeah, and I think what's so important, particularly about activating your volunteer networks, is I assume that you all have friends, and when you go out, you want to talk to your friends about fun things that you do. And so if you're providing as an organization these tools already, and like touch points and talking points about your organization, then naturally people are going to be talking more and more about the fun, exciting volunteer experiences they had, which then further spreads your message. And so we found that at Mission Graduates, a lot of our volunteer recruitment is word of mouth at this point. I mean, having 100 volunteers, just that base itself allows us the opportunity to bring more and more people into the organization.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also about empowering your volunteers to do things for you because they want to. And so asking them to bring a friend, asking them to donate, it's all about empowering them to do the things that you need them to do.
Our final recommendation is a bit more of a longer term strategy. So are unifying all our supporter work and aligning functions accordingly. So first, what I want to say to this is volunteers should be asked for donations, and they should be asked often. And so that is your longer term strategy in a nutshell, but how do we get there? And so that takes a lot more of internal work. And so I really encourage people, if they're development directors or chief development officers, to think through how to unify their supporter work. So putting, one way to do this, as Annie started the webinar, is showing how different the volunteer experience is from the donor experience on a website. Why can they not be the same link? Why can they not be the same? It should say, instead of just donate up at the right-hand corner, like donate and volunteer. So that people know that they can go to one place, they can donate, they can volunteer, and it's your one-stop shop. To do that often requires a lot of internal work. So I came in, as I said, in the development department and the communications and volunteer department really weren't in sync. So you have to have a CEO or someone in senior leadership who understands the importance of volunteers. And so I would push those development directors, when your CEO or your board comes to you and says, we need to raise more individual dollars, I would say, well, what are we investing in our volunteers? And what are we doing to signal to our volunteers that they're important? So one thing that I did by coming in was making sure that there was a senior level position at Mission Graduates that dealt with volunteers. So I have an amazing amazing director of volunteers and corporate engagement, and they're at a senior level position. What that signifies to volunteers is that they're important to them and to the organization. Because if there's a director person or a manager that they know that they can go to, and it's not an intern or a constant flow of someone new, then you're providing the volunteers the best experience. You're also signaling to the community and to the board and to corporations that you take this really seriously. So if you have a director of corporate engagement, then 9 times out of 10, a group, and we work with a lot of tech companies here in the Bay Area, but a group that is looking for an experience or orientation or a one-off opportunity, they're going to feel a lot more confident that you're able to pull off a situation or an event like that if you have a person whose title is that. So I think I'm a big believer that titles matter, particularly in development. And so not just thinking about volunteers, but what other constituencies are really important to you as an organization that you could call out in a title and say like, oh, we have a director of X, and so that people see that and they know that it's really important. So we, our individual giving when I came in and before we kind of centralized this process, so we went through about a 3 to 5 month centralization of moving communications and marketing under development, and then also moving volunteers under development. So we can have a unified process and we can see it all the way through. So now our donor pipeline stories include volunteer engagement as a stepping stone, and vice versa. Our volunteers get asked in timely ways, like Annie was talking about, either when they sign up or as soon as they're done with their volunteer experience. We use the Mobilize platform to thank them, send photos of their day, what they experienced, and a reminder that, hey, we're a nonprofit and we would love for you to donate some money as well. So these are all kind of those ways to really bring that culture of philanthropy together. And really, when you start doing those alignments, you can see gains. And so in the 6 months time that we started really focusing on our volunteers, we've seen 100% gain because we started at 0. So it really was interesting because when I came in, no one had asked volunteers to donate at Mission Graduates. And so we did some small touch items. We added them to our end of the year appeal as well. And just the rate of return we saw in that was really impressive, with more than our individual giving for the year is higher than it's ever been. We have more than $300,000, which compared to last year, which was about 100. So we're seeing, $200,000 just by doing these tiny tweaks that I think a lot of people don't always think about when they're thinking about how to organize their development department. So I would just stress volunteers should be asked to donate many times and often. I think that's the other thing. I know my team knows that they're not allowed to say the words annual, your annual gift or your annual fund, because that implies that you're giving once. And volunteers should not just be giving once. Every time you have a new initiative or a new program, like they're the people that are so invested in your organization. Why not ask them first? Do some of that test marketing with them as well. They're going to tell you, and they're going to be honest, like, this doesn't work, before you're starting to spread it out to other people. And really, when you think about that, that's volunteer engagement in itself. Like, that's just another kind of event that Annie was talking about earlier to just bring in action.
Well, it's cool to hear you talk about this, Adam Michael, because it's really one of the principles that Mobilize was built on, was that if we centralize all of the activity, so like you remember the feed from earlier on Mobilize where all of the actions were centralized in a feed. That's really how people, it's being able to look at it from the perspective of the person discovering your opportunities and not necessarily from the person managing them. It's how do people actually think about, or how do people actually search and discover what's easiest for them? And if we make it easy, the easier we make it, the better outcomes we're likely to have. Great. So I want to leave you with a couple of things. One, that because you guys are doing such amazing work, all of you, probably a lot of you responding to COVID-19, we want to offer free access to the core tier of Mobilize through May 31st for organizations. So please get in touch with me, get in touch with Emily, get in touch with our team. We can talk you through kind of the in-person to virtual events, how you make that shift, how you think about that, and hopefully get you on the platform. Some other plugs. We're doing a couple other presentations this week. Tomorrow, we're going to dig into volunteer engagement. So what to do when your volunteers can't show up in person and how to fill those gaps. That's tomorrow at 1. And then Thursday at 1, we're doing virtual organizing strategies. And feel free to hop on the phone with us. 30-minute consultations are happening. We had a booth at MTC. We're doing it virtually. So pick a time and chat with us. We'd love to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining this call.
We had a bunch of questions come in while you guys were talking. So
Okay.
I can read through those. Feel free to keep plugging questions into chat. We have, 20 minutes or so that we can answer things. So let us know. There's 1 or 2 questions that even I can answer, guys. So I can leave you a little reprieve from
You
speaking.
start. Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
So the first question was, can we integrate Mobilize on our published website? The answer is yes. There are 3 options for doing this. 1, you can have a branded feed that lives on the mobilize.us domain. So it would be, for example, the NTC events that we're hosting are mobilize.us/NTC 2020. So you would have that automatically. It would have your logo and colors and all that. Or you can embed the feed on your site. So people would go to your site and there would be an events feed on there. They can sign up directly. Or we have clients that white label this feed. So the best example I can point you to are Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. If you go to their site and sign up for an event, it'll say like events.joebiden2020.com. They're using Mobilize and it's white labeled. So those are 3 options. They come with different pricing tiers, but as Annie mentioned, we are offering that free access to the core platform for any COVID-19 relief efforts. So we can walk you through the setup for those of you that apply for that. Here's a good one, a really timely one for Annie and Adam Michael. Someone asked that they would love to hear our thoughts for when the supporter base is comprised mainly of healthcare professionals, many of whom are critically involved in clinical research or policy work. Obviously, the caveat is, of the 3 of us, none of us work in that field directly, but do you have any thoughts about engaging that user base, trying to expand that user base, anything?
It's interesting. We've had a lot of clients actually a lot of prospective clients in the last few months in this field come talk to us, because a lot of health organizations are doing a lot of advocacy work to draw attention to kind of the issues that they're solving for, and how do we get supporters to back us? How do we get people to hear us? How do we get policy changed? So that's one way that we're supporting. Another potential way that I could see us supporting health professionals is certainly through trainings, hosting orientations. I know that one of the big things, at least at Mercy Corps, when I was doing kind of health-related response in emergency scenarios, a lot of what felt was needed was getting people upskilled really quickly and at scale. And so this is definitely one of those ways that Mobilize could potentially help with that issue, is by kind of getting a lot of people with the right skills in one place and then getting them to go do the work that's needed on the ground.
Adam, Michael, did you want to add to that, or is that sufficient?
Yeah, I mean, I also am connected to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, which their supporter base is a lot of healthcare professionals. So one of the things that I think that you can do is, if it feels uncomfortable to like be asking them directly for support of the organization, I think one of the things that you can do in this situation is ask them what they need support in. As an organization, it sounds like if a lot of your healthcare professionals or your supporters, I'm assuming you're in some sort of healthcare foundation base. But asking people and checking in with your supporters then on like, how are they? And seeing what ways the organization can support them. That's more of a long-term strategy that's going to yield return in the long term. If they know that you were there for them during this crisis, then they're going to be there for you afterwards. So I think it's flipping the script a little bit on who your constituency base is during this time, and recognizing that you might need to be asking them for what they need help on, rather than just asking a one way of what this is what we need help with.
Really good point. This is sort of a follow-up question, but actually on the flip side, we had a question about how are people thinking about messaging right now, given all the important COVID-related challenges? For example, people being laid off, healthcare protective equipment, food access. This person works at a nonprofit, but is personally having trouble figuring out how to ask for donations when he or she would rather give their own money to causes directly tackling COVID right now.
Well, I would say that every cause is directly tackling COVID right now. And I make a pretty strong statement about that. I was also really struggling last week as a fundraiser, like how are we going to ask people? And then honestly, it comes down to when I have a conversation with my CFO and we look at cash flow, and we're realizing very quickly that if this continues, we're going to have more than 100 of our own staff in this situation, then you directly are responding to COVID, because nonprofits are going to have to start laying off staff members. They're going to have to start making cuts in program. And for me, our vision is that college is attainable, and we try to level the playing field every day. Well, in a public health crisis, the playing field isn't level. We all know that. We see this in college access, that, there are ways to access college, particularly we've seen this in the Bay Area in the last year with the college scandal, and that just further diminishes that playing field. And so I think during this time, you have to stay true to your mission and say, at the end of the day, the arts are really important, and they're going to be important beyond this crisis. We're going to need theaters and community spaces, because I can tell you, as soon as I can get out of the house, I want to be at the symphony. I want to be at the ballet. So we need to have all these, cultural institutions have to be there. And so I would really push all of the development professionals on here to be thinking that you are working directly in response. I know it's not, directly giving out masks or being in the medical field, but you're providing this safety net of our country right now. That's really our community, and we have to be there when this is all over.
Yeah, Adam, Michael, I think what was really powerful when you and I were talking the other day is around the FAFSA application, the tax. Can you talk I think that was a really powerful example. I think this audience would love to hear.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that a lot of people are probably excited about is your tax deadline being extended to June. What that means for us, though, is that FAFSA, your federal application for student aid, is going to be delayed. And what does that mean for an entire generation of people that are going to be accessing college? And so if you're not familiar with FAFSA, you have to do it every year. It's not just your first year that you get into college. So we're talking literally an entire group of people from their senior year in high school now to year 4 or 5 of college. Like, what does that look like? And beyond that, also, like, maybe because of what happened, 4 years for college is probably not going to be the norm for the next 2 or 3 years. A lot of kids and students are going to have to take that 5th year because there weren't ways to figure this out online. And so that is kind of when I realized that we're directly involved in COVID, because our students can't access that. And I think that that's just so important to think about how it's affecting you as an organization, and highlighting those when you're pushing out that message. And then another example, we work with a lot of otherwise documented citizens. So if you've been following the news, immigration services have been suspended, and they have not provided a lot of clarity on what that means. And so if you're a family that already living in this culture are concerned about where they're getting food and where they're working, and now they're not able to follow the path of citizenship that they thought they were in, that's where we as an organization have to step in and really provide that guidance.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Adam Michael. A little bit change of gears. We had a question, does Mobilize offer any volunteer training modules? This is something we're actually focused on right now. We currently have one help desk article, which we'll send out about how volunteers can find virtual opportunities on our platform. Like Annie mentioned, historically, we've seen about 25% of signups go towards virtual opportunities. And in the past week, that has spiked above 90%. So we're responding pretty quickly to that behavior. We're also building out blog posts that will explain kind of what each type of virtual action entails, from phone banks to virtual town halls, for people who maybe have been an in-person supporter in the past and are looking for virtual ways to participate, but don't know what that looks like or how to get involved. So as those get created, we will definitely send them to you guys. On the organizer side, our success team is beginning to host weekly virtual organizing video trainings for anyone on our platform to make sure that they're set up for success in this new environment. All right, and then I think the last question, if you guys have any others, throw them in chat. We still have some time, but last question I have are any suggestions on how to create an organization mindset on soliciting volunteers who aren't yet donors?
Oh, Adam Michael, this feels like a you question.
I wrote down your name next to this one.
I think, shifting organizational culture is something that's really difficult. I'm not going to say it's easy. You have to really get in by clout with your leadership team. I have an amazingly supportive C team that works with me. Hopefully your development is in the senior leadership team and has that agency. But I think it's important to go to your CEO or your boss and say that this is something that you recognize and that we have to start shifting as an organization. So, I think if they're numbers driven person, there's really good research out there on how much volunteers give. The giving guide every year that comes out has that information. I don't have it off the top of my head, but if you really want to know those numbers, you can shoot me an email. I can find them. And then I think it's also like building that with your board. A lot of people don't think of the board as volunteers, but they're your strongest volunteers. And so if you have a really strong board culture and a really strong culture of philanthropy with your board, and they understand that they're volunteers and they're being asked, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to kind of drop that down to your grassroots volunteers. If you have like more questions and like really want to get into the tacticals about that, shoot me an email. I'm always love to talk about philanthropy and organizational culture. That's kind of my forte. So I'm open to having more conversation about that.
I think also revisiting some of what Annie said, we recognize that problem in nonprofits, which is why on the platform, you can set it up so that when volunteers sign up for an opportunity, they're prompted with the chance to donate. So it's built in there. It's not a separate approach. It's all part of the same experience. So for us, we have a network of 1.7 million volunteers and rapidly growing. And we've seen that 15% of those who are shown the request to donate initiate that donation. So then having that data, Adam Michael is able to go back to the team and say, no, look, these volunteers are really eager to donate. And it's actually an overall supporter. They can be an advocate, a donor, supporter, volunteer, all in one person.
I think to echo that, like the key thing is automation. Like don't make it an extra task, right? Like I think development professionals get really bogged down in like a to-do list. And so anytime you can automate something, do it. And that's why I love Mobilize. It's so easy for the collection of donations to come through. And then, just all we did was add like 2 or 3 things to our volunteer experience. And the way that Mobilize allows the sign up to happen and the follow through, it just really collects everything so smartly. And I think one of the things, that we really, really find useful is that follow up after volunteers, thanking them, and then, using the Mobilize system to send those text messages is just so amazing compared to emails. It keeps me on track a lot more even. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that if you can automate, use a software system. Mobilize has made it super simple, and the team has been super easy to work with, and we really loved being a pilot organization with you all.
You're the best at it, Michael. We had One final question, the all important question, how much does Mobilize cost on average? Annie, feel free to jump in. My response is that's actually a very hard question to answer.
Yeah.
We have everything from a grassroots tier to an enterprise tier, and with different capabilities kind of spaced out, different number of users, volunteers, all that. So get in touch with me or Annie. We can kind of figure out what level you would be at, give you some approximate pricing so you can move forward. And again, if you are planning to use Mobilize for COVID-19 specific relief efforts, access is free through the end of May. Sorry, one more question came in. How well does Mobilize integrate with an existing Salesforce system? That's a really great question. We are literally building the integration as we speak. That is a top priority for nonprofits, and it is in the works. So keep an eye out. We'll send you our newsletters for announcements on that, but it's a major priority for us right now.
Yeah, we know a lot of nonprofits have Salesforce, and that's definitely something that we want to prioritize.
Yeah, and we actually use Salesforce. So this was a concern of mine, and I had frank conversations with Annie and the team when we started piloting, like, why would we have two systems? And I still haven't seen a reason not to have Mobilize, and doing some manual conversions into Salesforce, we've been able to stay on top of that until the integration takes place. But it's very doable with the current way that Mobilize is set up.
Yeah, and I would just say, yeah, exactly. One of the things, we're sort of meant to sit on top of a CRM, as many of you are probably understanding. And I think the value proposition is really twofold. If you want to recruit more supporters, not just volunteers, but supporters, donors, advocates, volunteers, and then engage them and drive them to action at the highest rates possible, that is where we are most effective.
Great. Well, with that, we can wrap up. Quick reminder, we will send out a recording as soon as it's processed, as well as some of the additional resources we've referenced to help you guys navigate this quickly changing environment. That will also include this form for the free access, as I'm sure many of you are writing down the URL. You will also receive an invitation to consult directly with someone from the Mobilize team, likely Annie herself, to help put these 4 strategies that they outlined into action specifically at your organization. Overall, your passion and generosity are exactly what the world needs right now, and we are so grateful at the opportunity to support you. And thank you to Adam Michael for joining us. You are just an amazing thought leader and resource, and have been a dream pilot partner. So thank you again, everyone, for joining, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.